Farmers evaluate several physical factors in making decisions, such as the soil, which is the depth, texture, and nutrient composition of it, and they require slightly acidic soils. Next is the relief, which is the shape of the field, or the slope and altitude. Flatter lands are best for agriculture because slope lands can be difficult to irrigate. Next is the climate. It's the most influential of the physical factors, and the two components, temperature and rainfall, are the main two components of it.
For economic factors, there's subsistence farming, which feeds families, and commercial farming, which is selling to overall the whole global nation. Land rent is more costly in center and less costly outside, and there's transportation, which is basically transportation costs, which also affects the farming industry, which is just basically the further away you are from the city, the most costly it is for transportation, and the closer you are, it's less.
Okay, next we have political and cultural factors. An example of cultural factors include religious beliefs, where there are many beliefs in certain religions that affect agricultural decisions, such as in Hinduism. They view that it's wrong to kill cattle, and it is a taboo in Islamic regions to eat pigs. However, taboos aren't always religious, such as in mainstream American culture, we disapprove eating horses. We think it's kind of wrong, even though it's really nutritious meat. Another example of a cultural factor is when immigrants carry with them their homeland's farming practices and food preferences into their new area or destination. Whenever they move, they're taking their farming styles and they therefore inject those farming styles into the land that they've moved into. Here you can see the immigrants who have moved and the crop that they planted right below them. Right? The first example for a political decision that impacts the agricultural landscape is in less developed countries, farmers are often financially encouraged by the government to adopt more advanced agricultural technology. This helps them to subside the use of the revolution. This all started with the Green Revolution, in which many less developed countries tried to subside the use of the revolution's more efficient seed types that were more expensive than the common seeds of the time. Another example, it's just them. They got paid money in order to advance the technology they used when farming. The next political example is the European Union, their decision to pay farmers not to grow crops in an attempt to eliminate massive surpluses that were driving prices so low that the farmers could not survive. Many European countries actually have agricultural products that they consider national treasures, such as French wine grapes, but it's very hard to remove the production of one of these crops. In the end, many of the political factors kind of revolve around money, whether it's getting money to advance your farming practices or to not have any farming practices at all, to not grow crops or anything.
Von Thunen's model explains and predicts where and why various agricultural activities take place around a city's marketplace. It predicts agricultural land use patterns. This model assumes there is one central marketplace where all farmers sell their products. The farmland is equally farmable and productive, and there is only one mode of transportation. The central marketplace is surrounded by agricultural activity zones that are in concentric rings, and each ring represents different land use. The first ring is market gardening and dairy. Market gardening and dairy is closest to the center because milk spoils very quickly, and it's not land intensive, or it doesn't use as much land. The second ring outside is the forest. Third would be your field crops, which would be wheat that uses a lot of land.
Mr. Hill, yes, ma'am. Is this scrap keep over here?
And
Yes,
animal grazing is the last because it's the most extensive of all.
Mr. Hill, you're so sassy.
The land closest to the center is more expensive, and the land furthest away from the center is less expensive, but it costs more to transport stuff outside of the city. Historically, the shape of a village's layout is related to its function and environment. For example, European villages are put on hillsides with flatlands used for farming. The hillsides protect the village from attackers. Other villages in Asia, Africa, and Europe were round in shape with space in the cattle for the middle. In the middle, most villages were built to a grid with geometric boundaries.
Materials commonly used is from least level to most level are oven baked brick, sun-dried brick, and then goes to poles and sticks, and then grass and brush, and then stone, and then finally wood would be the most developed materials used.
The third agricultural revolution began in North America, and it drastically increased food supply. It mechanized farming technology and chemical fertilizers on a global level. Farming and food processing were completed at different sites. It became more common for commercial farmers to harvest their crops and ship them off to food processing sites. Different parts of the production process are completed by different departments. For example, this wheat farmer would send his wheat over to factories, and his wheat would be processed into processed products, and the finished product would then be sold and marketed to the consumers. Another example is Purity Dairies in Nashville, Tennessee. Local farms would sell their unprocessed milk to Purity Dairy factories, and then the milk is processed, packaged, and put into trucks for distribution. This kind of process is called agribusiness, and it's the commercialization and industrialization of food production process. It involves everything from development of seeds to marketing and sale of food products. It's the combination of different pieces of the food production industry. It includes farms, processing plants, packagers, fertilizer laboratories, distributors, and advertising agencies.
Now we have globalization of the farming process. The colonial and imperial campaigns of the 18th and 19th centuries built a system between the core and peripheral regions in the world. European coloners took over lands in peripheral regions like Asia, South America, and Africa, and used these regions and colonies to supply their people with raw goods. By the late 1800s and 1900s, the economies of the colonized countries were entrenched in a master-dependent relationship with the colonizers. Even after gaining political independence, the former colonies essentially continued to survive by providing crops for export to the more developed countries that were once their imperial masters. This neo-colonial or post-colonial dependent relationship has fueled the globalization of the farming process. This helps to explain why you'll find that food sold in grocery stores throughout more developed countries is often grown in peripheral, less developed regions of the world that ship their food to factories for processing and to markets in the more developed world, therefore making happy customers. One process that is commonly used in production is called truck farming, which is a commercial garden they're commercial gardens and also examples of intensive commercial agriculture. The commercial agriculture, it could be truck farming can also refer to intensive commercial agriculture, especially in the context of a core country. Their share-based organic farming is a major type of truck farming in the United States and Europe, in which these farms often grow both vegetables and chickens, and just for example, and they use the eggs produced by the chickens to clear and fertilize their plots. Also, pigs are sometimes raised to eat plants that are for some reason unfit for human consumption. So, in intensive commercial agriculture, they use different products made from many of the crops or animals that they raise in order to create a better farming process. Just as a computer production process often involves an international division of labor, such as production in Asia, assembly in Europe, and all that, the farming process has become a food production process divided on an international level into an agribusiness system.
The Green Revolution began in the 1940s and developed new strains of hybrid seeds and fertilizers that increased the output of crop per unit of land. These new seeds required nitrogen-enriching fertilizers and increased protection from diseases and pest infestations. Grain production increased by 45% and rice production increased by 66% because of these new seeds. This new technology reduced the amount of labor needed in some farm areas. But the negatives to this is that these higher yielding crop strains are more prone to viruses and pest infestations. And it also leads to higher levels of crop failure in some area. These seeds are also much more expensive, and poorer countries in Africa, for example, can't afford them. Less than 5% of African farmers use Green Revolution seeds. Pesticides used during the Green Revolution also caused pollution and soil contamination problems. Workers frequently exposed to the chemicals suffered health problems. Biotechnology. Agricultural biotechnology is using living organisms to produce or change plant or animal products. Genetic modification is a form of biotechnology that uses scientific manipulation of crops and animal products to improve agricultural productivity and products. Reorganizing plant and animal DNA is also a form of genetic modification. Some improvements to modification. Result is super plants that grow at much faster rates, even in nutrient-poor soils, and have pesticides and fertilizers integrated into their DNA. Scientists have also made some crops that are drought-resistant and are not just weak to diseases. Also, there are genetically modified animals that are manipulated and cloned to produce larger and better output, such as the super chicken, which produces more meat at a faster rate. Also, in addition to increasing food output, it reduces the cost of farming and can help the environment. It requires less fertilizers and therefore reduces environmental pollution caused by chemicals. There are some negatives, though. Cloned plants are more susceptible to crop diseases sometimes, and they do reduce genetic diversity. World hunger exists largely in distribution of food supplies and people's ability to access these food supplies. Social and economic structure inherent in inequality causes food security issues, undernutrition, and famine. Undernutrition is the lack of sufficient calories and nutrients. Good example is this first picture here. And famine is mass starvation resulting from prolonged undernutrition in a region during a certain period. There are often reasons why this happens. For example, civil war, severe drought, or some other trigger that starts a period of famine. In more advanced countries, stockpiling, food is stockpiling and just rotting, and food shortages and periods of famine are occurring in some other areas. Because of the growing population, many farmers in many regions are trying to grow food at faster rates. There's a negative consequence to this, which is soil erosion, the loss of nutrient-rich top layer in the soil. Nearly 7% of the world's rich topsoil is being destroyed each decade. And also there is desertification, which is the loss of habitable land to the expansion of deserts. This can occur from both human and natural causes, but humans have contributed to the expansion of the Sahara Desert, for example, because of the intense use of land. The loss of forest areas or deforestation is caused by humans chopping down wooded areas at rates so fast that these areas cannot regenerate. Some estimate that rainforest on the equator will be completely destroyed in less than a century. As the result of soil erosion, and to try to save these precious land resources, governments and organizations have organized debt for nature swaps, which forgive international debts owed by developing countries in exchange for these countries protecting valuable and natural land resources from human destruction.